Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's live learning event on the Grooper Design Studio versus the Design Page, Part 2. This is the fourth event in our moving to the Grooper Web Client series, which is designed to give you insights on moving forward to newer versions of Grooper with clarity and confidence. Thanks for joining us. My name is Brad Blood, and I will be the moderator for today's event. If you've got any questions, you can send them in through the Q&A box at the bottom of the screen. At least in my version of Zoom, they've hidden that. So it's hidden underneath. You navigate to the bottom of your screen under More. There's a little circle with 3 dots. And if you click on that, that's where the Q&A box is hidden now. So if you have any questions for us through today's live learning event, you could submit those through that Q&A, and we will answer your questions as time allows. We're also recording this meeting, and we will be sending out a link to everyone who registered for today's event. We'll also add this recording to the Grooper YouTube channel, so be sure to subscribe to Grooper AI on YouTube to never miss a thing. Okay, today's speaker is Randall Kynard, the Training and Curriculum Specialist here at Grooper, with a background in 3D digital media and video production and a ton of Grooper knowledge. Randall combines a highly technical and demanding training curriculum with elegance and attention to detail. With the rare gift of communicating extremely technical things in a practical and detailed manner, he's a true expert and a valued Grooper resource. Randall, take it away.
Thanks, Brad. Glad everyone's here, and I'm glad to be here. Well, this is going to be a part 2 of what we did in last month's session of showing off the design page, essentially. So without further ado, I want to jump into the design page and start showing off more UI stuff so that we can get some comfort with what we're expecting to be working with on a regular basis. So I'll get out of here. And here I am on the design page. If I were to go to the home page, just so it's clear, I can go either up here at the top to my hammer and spanner icon to go to designer page, and I can also click the button here to go to design. So one of the things that I didn't get to last time that I want to cover for sure is the creation and management of batch processes. So to do that, I'm just going to hop into one of these projects I have, and I'm going to look at, say, this sample thing that I've been working on, and I've got a batch process here, and it's got several steps. Now, before I show this one off any further, I want to show just like a quick addition. I'm just going to add a project. I'll call this new for now, and I'm going to add a content model, and I'll also just call it new, and I'll create a batch process. So in my project, I could go into, I think I could even put it in my local resources of a content model. No, I can't add it there. I just have to put it in the project. That's fine. If I add a batch process, I can give my batch process a name. So again, this is just done with an object command of right-clicking on a project, going to add batch process, and I'll give this a name, call this BP for batch process. Now, when we're working with a batch process, there's 2 main commands we will want to use. There's going to be add. Now, the add command is going to add a blank batch process step. So if I just do the add command, it's going to be a blank step, and I have to assign an activity to it of all the activities we have available for batch process steps. Now, usually the easier way to do this is to right-click and do add activity. And within add activity, we can pick from all these. We've got review, and then they're organized based on different stuff here. So a common one might be something like transform, split pages. A lot of batch processes start with split pages. So you can see when we add activity and we add it that way, it not only names the batch process step for us based on the activity, but it also goes ahead and sets the activity for us. Now, I'm not going to go into a whole lot of functionality here. I'm mostly showing off UI. I just do want to touch on one of the most important properties you're going to configure on every batch process step, which is going to be the scope. This gets confusing for some people sometimes, and you just want to be able to have an understanding of what this is. So with the scope, we're telling it, what are we looking at? In this case, we're looking at folders or batch folders, and we're specifically looking to process folders at level 1. So if I were to go to an activity tester here, I can see I've got a batch viewer. This batch folder here at the top, this would be what you might call the folder 0 or the batch scope. And this is our folder scope, and this is folder level 1. So then we've got inside folder level 1 here a page. So the page scope is universal. Whenever you point a step at the page scope, it's going to consider all pages. It doesn't matter if the page is a child of a folder that's at level 85. It's just the page scope. Whereas this is the scope of folder level 1. If I were to come in here and let's say foldering, add a folder, this folder is now considered folder level 2. So if I were wanting to specifically process stuff at level 2, I would want to, on my batch process, set my scope to folder, but set my folder level to 2. So that's not going to process stuff at level 1. It's only going to process stuff at level 2, but it will process all folders at level 2. Anyway, just wanted to touch on that really quickly. Now, that's the quick and easy way to add batch process steps that have their activity set to batch process. I also wanted to go ahead and take a look at testing. So one of the things you want to be aware of is the activity tester tab. This is going to be used a lot as a designer. As you design out a batch process, you're going to want to come in here, of course, configure your batch process step activity to be, set to all the things that you want. And then when you go to your tester, there's two things that you want to do. There's going to be testing the actual scope directly on your computer. And that's with this button here. You've got this little test activity button. Now you'll see that it's grayed out currently because my scope is set to folder and my folder level is 1. And in my batch viewer, I currently have a page selected. So it's not going to let me process that because it's not the right scope. If I go up to the correct scope and select it, this is folder level 1, we can now see that that button is highlighted. Now, the test activity button is going to use local system resources of your computer to test the step in a single threaded fashion. So if I had a bunch of folders in here at level 1 and I selected all of those folders, either shift clicking or control clicking, I can select all of them and I can test the activity locally on my machine. But it's going to do it in a single threaded fashion, so one object at a time, which is fine, especially if you're testing because you're just doing probably small batch samples. But of course, doing the test activity on your local machine single threaded, if you have like a huge batch, that's not going to be ideal. What you want to do instead is use the submit job button. So before we use the submit job button, we want to make sure on our machines folder that on our local system here that we've got an activity processing service running. Now, a couple of webinars ago, we looked at GCC. We looked at how to use the command prompt within GCC to add activities. And, here is where we would typically want to configure those activities. You can configure them through GCC. It's just easier to add an activity processing service and then manage it through the machines folder on the node tree and design on the design page. So I can see that I've got this activity process service running. It's only got one thread, which isn't going to make a big difference for me because single threaded is single threaded. But if I had a much more distributed environment with a bunch of machines, with a bunch of activity processing services and a bunch of threads available, I'm going to be able to process, multiple tasks simultaneously via multi-threading, which is quite useful. So again, if I were to come in here and go to my split pages activity and I were to click this button here, let's say I'm just going to add something in just for the sake of showing it. I've got these PDFs here, so I could drop in a PDF and let's go ahead and submit the job, what this is going to do. So you'll notice with submit job, I don't have to have the appropriate scope selected. It's going to submit the job based on the configuration of the thing. So what this is going to do is it's going to create a job with a number of tasks according to what I have available for needing to be processed. In this case, this would be one job with two tasks because there are two batch folders at folder level 1, and it's going to attempt to split the pages. So as soon as I click this button, I've got the process owner here. This is the name of the actual batch process. There's just some stuff here that if I needed to adjust, I could. Priority, this is an inverse relationship, so 1 is higher than 5, for example. If I were to click OK, it's going to immediately jump me over to the jobs page, and we're going to see a list of jobs here. Now, I could delete these. I could manage these. The jobs page is its own thing. Mostly, it's just for seeing the jobs that are done. And we can see if I were to look at my progress here, there were 2 of 2 tasks that got completed. at 100%. And if I go back to the design page now, we can see that both of these documents have split pages, which is good. I don't need this one anymore. I can just delete it. Now, something I also wanted to show is publishing a batch process. So if I take this batch process, you'll notice that there's this folder here called processes. So I'm going to take this batch process and I'm going to click the publish button. And what it's going to do is it's going to make a read-only copy of this batch process in the processes folder. With this batch process in the processes folder, it's now available for production. So if I were to make a new batch, either on the batches page or maybe say on the imports page, this batch process would now be available for selection when creating that batch and associating it with a batch process. Now, if I wanted to, remove this batch process, there's a couple of things I want to keep in mind. First of all, what it does is it's going to, instead of just flat deleting it, it's going to move it to the archived versions folder. So if I want to get rid of this, I will go to the batch process here, and I've got this button here for unpublished. This is the working version. So just to show this, if I've got the published batch process here, I can, what is it? I think it's double click it. Oh, here it is. So you can see that there's this working version property. And this is something I want you to get familiar with. Whenever you have a reference to something in Grooper, there's going to be a property that is actually doing the referencing. In this case, it's the working versions property. And you can see that this is underlined. So if I were to click on this underline or double click this underlined thing now, it's going to jump me into the node tree to that object. So this is the working batch process. I can now unpublish this, and it's going to move that batch process to a folder after its name in the archived versions folder. And we're going to see here that this is the archived version. Now, the reason this is important is because it's quite possible to unpublish a batch process while you still have batches that are in production. So having an archived version will prevent breaking those batches that are in production. And then of course, once you got done, you could, remove it. But you can see here on the published version, there's this batches folder. And if we go to the batches folder, what it's going to do is it's going to display a list of batches that have jobs that are associated with this batch process. Now, currently there aren't any, which is great, which means I could just fully delete this if I wanted to, which I'm going to go ahead and do. I'm just going to delete this whole folder and I could get rid of it. But just keep that in mind. If you've got a batch process that's archived, you can go to the batches tab. You can see a list of batches that are still using that batch process. You can fully manage all of that stuff like you would on the batches page or on the batches folder and the processed or test in the batches area of the node tree. But just keep that in mind. So I'm going to go ahead and delete this guy. And I've still got an archived versions folder. It's just empty at this point. The next thing I wanted to show was I wanted to touch really quickly again on data model styling. I've got a content model here with a data model, and I've done a lot of, styling on this to make this look a certain way. Now, this is all done with CSS. So if you come in here and look at this, I've got a style sheet that I'm using. There is this data model styling.css style sheet, which is really useful because instead of having to repeat the usage of all of your CSS, you can make one style sheet that you could then move to different resource folders of different projects. And you could always reference this if you've got this kind of universal CSS thing that you've been doing for styling your stuff. Of course, you can just go to the style sheet property of a data model and click on that, and then you could start typing in the CSS. Now, I do want to call out that there is a great article on this on the Grooper Wiki. If I go to, I think if I just type in CSS, CSS data viewer styling. And this is a very thorough article that covers all the things you would want to know about styling your model with CSS. There's examples, there's actual code snippets for showing you how to do stuff. It's showing you the different things you want to consider. And you always just want to keep this page in mind if you're getting used to CSS with your styling of your model in Grooper, because, if you just make let's go to this new guy that I made here. And if I were to make a data model and let's just say I add several data fields here, I'm just going to do thing one, another thing, and yet another thing, right? And those are all done. So I can click execute. And I've got 3 items here. Now I can see looks a little bit messy because these labels are longer than one another. But if I go into my style sheet, for example, I can do, I think it's dot data field. Yeah. And you can see there's CSS IntelliSense that really helps with this. So I can type in dot data field, hit arrow down tab, and then I could do label. I believe it's label, and then do that there. And I could say width is 150 pixels. And if I save that now, we can see that I've pushed all of the widths of those labels out, and that just makes it look a little bit cleaner. That's a really simple example, but that's just something you can do. So you want to get used to the different objects that you can call in CSS, like dot data field, et cetera, et cetera. And that's all going to be made more understandable by this article in the Grooper Wiki. So again, I suggest using that. Another thing that I think is kind of neat that I wanted to show is if I go to the actual server where this Grooper environment is hosted. So Grooper's installed on this machine, the web client's installed on this machine. What I can do is I can actually go to the C drive, and there's this inet pub folder, and in the root there's the Grooper website. So this is the actual website. Now within the website I can go into the bin folder, or is it bin? No, it's views. No, I think it is bin. Sorry. Nope, it's content. Yeah, and then in content, there's the styles folder. And in the styles folder, there's the site.css file. So I could open this, and this is the actual site of the actual CSS of the entire Grooper website. So if I wanted to, I could go wild in here and I could style everything in Grooper however I wanted to. Now, I caution you, you want to be careful doing that because if you don't know what you're doing, you could make it look kind of weird. The other thing is that every time you upgrade Grooper, even minor versions, this gets overwritten. So if you have decided that you want to go crazy and super stylized Grooper, you want to make a copy. And then if you ever update Grooper, you're going to want to put that back in there. Now, one thing I have put in here, and this is kind of an interesting thing, is I've added this custom bit of CSS to this to obscure my license keys because I do webinars and I don't want my keys being exposed. So I put this little blur filter on them, which is kind of neat. And I always put this back whenever I upgrade Grooper. So what that's letting me do is, like on the root node, you can see I've got my license serial number here and it's being blurred because I don't want you guys to know my code. But there it is. I've got it blurred. And if I click on it, which I'm not going to do, it actually unblurs it because that's part of what the CSS that I put in. So that's kind of neat. The other thing is on, let's say, this batch process step here, I've got this batch viewer. This flag icon here is useful because what it does is it will jump me directly in the node tree to where that batch folder is. Why you would want to do that is completely up to you, but it's just an ease of navigation, which is quite useful. So if you're in a batch and like an activity tester tab or something, you see that flag icon, it'll jump you straight to that batch folder in the node tree, which is quite handy. Let's see what else. So I showed you double clicking the underlying link of the working version in the publish batch process, which is good to know. Another area where you will see this is, you're going to see these underlined things all over the place. But like, let's say I go into this batch process that I made and let's add a recognize step, for example. And I'm going to go to my batch process step tab and I'm going to point it at an OCR profile that I don't have, but what I can do is just make one real quick. I don't even have to configure it. I'll just call this OCRP for OCR profile. I'll go into recognize. I'll click on this guy. I'll point it at that OCR profile. And now that that thing is referencing something, you'll see that it's underlined. So again, if I have a property that's referencing something, I can double click on that and it will jump me to that object in the node tree, which is quite useful. Another thing that's quite good to know is in a batch, if we go to the viewer, you can see right here that this thing has an attachment. So I drag and dropped a PDF into here to do testing, and this PDF exists as an attachment to this batch folder. For example, if I look at this batch folder object and go to the advanced tab, I can see that there's this invoice.pdf. This PDF is attached to my batch folder. So if I have my batch folder selected, or even here in the batch viewer, if I've got this underlined bit here, if I double click this, I can download it directly. That can be useful for any number of reasons. So just know that if you've got an attachment on a batch folder, you can double click that attachment where it is underlined, and you can immediately download it. And that's, can be useful. The renditions button up here is quite handy. So I've got the children of this batch folder, and which in this case is just a page. And I've got that there. So if I click on the page, it's just got a page. It's just an image. But if I were to say, come in here and go to my recognize step, and let's say I do it here. I'm going to go up to this one because it's configured for something a little better. It's using Azure DI OCR instead of just a nothing OCR profile. We can see it's great there. So if I click on this, I'm going to click on the page object and I'm going to run it. We'll give it just a second. Any questions so far, Brad?
Nope, none so far. Just a reminder, if you would like to submit a question, you can do it through the Q&A box at the bottom of the screen.
Okay, now that I've OCR'd this, I could come up here to renditions, and I've not only got the PDF, which is the normal attached file, the children in this case, which is the page object, which is this image, but I've also got either on the page object, the text, or up here on the document, I can see the text, and that's going to show me the recognized text from running OCR. But because I run DI OCR on this, I've also got layout, which is quite useful. So I've got this highlighting of line recognition and highlighting the segments of text. I think this is really coming actually from the fact that a default OCR profile has layout attached to it. But Azure DI OCR also does do some really powerful document form recognition stuff too. So anyway, the point here is showing you this renditions button. So this can be quite handy to understand a little bit more about your batch pages or batch folders, etc. Another thing I want to show is this is important to understand because you can break stuff if you're not careful. Here in my environment, I've got some AI search indexes that I've used for testing. So up on the Grooper root node, I can go to this indexes tab and I can see that I've got some search indexes that I've created. If I wanted to, I could select one of these search indexes and I could click this go to the content type associated with the selected search index button. I could click that and it's going to jump me into the node tree where that content type is that has that search index. So this content type has been set up with the indexing behavior. I've created the search index. I've, added some search index stuff to it. And what I want to be careful of is if I ever want to get rid of this search index, I want to use this object command, delete search index, because it's really easy to orphan a search index if you're not careful. So for example, if I were to go to just delete this content type, the search index still exists and I haven't gotten rid of it yet. So if I were to go to my Azure site and look at my indexes, it would still exist in Azure. It still technically exists in Grooper. So like if I were to go to the search page and I come up here to the top, I've got these indexes that are available to me. I would still see it as a drop down there, and that's a problem. So you just want to be aware if you're ever going to delete a search index, don't delete the content type that's using it first. You want to first delete the search index, then delete the content type if you're going to get rid of it. The delete search index command will not only delete that search index from this indexes list here in the Grooper environment, but it's also going to get rid of it from the Azure side as well. Now, there is a way around this if you ever need to fix it. If you go to the advanced tab of the Grooper root node, you can see that there's this AI search JSON file. And within this AI search JSON file is a key value pair list of the search indexes. You technically could edit this and get rid of it, and that would kind of clear that problem, but hopefully you don't end up having to do that. And you just be aware, use the object command to delete it first and then delete your content type, etc. And then finally, the last thing I'll show you guys before I let you go is in this newer version of Grooper, we're looking at 2543. There's been this import filter that's been added. It's a security thing as we're learning to comply with new security standards of different companies, et cetera. And what this is is a comma separated list of file types that are allowed to be brought into Grouper. Now you'll see a bunch of stuff here: TIFFs, JPEGs, docs, XLSX, PPs, etc. One of the things that's missing, unfortunately, this is just a small oversight, this might get fixed, is .csv. So if you are using CSV files, it's very easy to come in here and just do a comma, space, or you probably don't even need the space, and just add CSV to it. And that is now a file that's allowed to be brought into Grouper if I were to click OK. So not a big deal. You can add that there. Keep in mind, if you're having trouble bringing in a file, it has to be one of these file types. You can add the file type to it if you want to, and you're good to go from there. And I think that's all that I have to show you guys today. If there are any questions, I would love to answer them. But otherwise, I'll give it up to Brad and we'll wrap things up.
All right. Thanks, Randall. That was great. Yeah, if you have any questions, send them in the last minute or so that we're together today. But in the meantime, thanks for joining us. We hope this has given everyone some real helpful information on how new versions of Grouper can help you and kind of how they compare. Remember, we'll be emailing out a link to this video in the next couple of days, either today or either tomorrow or Friday, and we will add it to the Grouper YouTube channel also. We encourage you to rewatch this or share it with friends or coworkers who might benefit. And if you're ready to learn more or have any questions once we get done with this video about this or how Grouper can help you directly, please reach out to myself, Randall, or anybody else on the Grouper team. But until next time, thanks everybody.